They believed they had the upper hand. Two officers pulling over a solitary driver, ready to assert their authority. But what they didn't realize was that the woman behind the wheel wasn't just any driver. She was their new superior, the chief of police, and this stop was about to alter everything. Kendra Hayes had always been a woman of quiet resilience, someone who understood what it meant to rise above challenges. After years of dedication, today marked the start of a new chapter. Her first day as the chief of police in the vibrant town of Cedar View. It was an accomplishment she had fought for, overcoming numerous obstacles, including a justice system that seemed designed to hold her and others like her back. She drove along the winding highway leading into the city, the early morning sun casting a gentle light over the horizon. Her grip on the steering wheel was just a little tighter than usual. This was supposed to be a day of joy, but Kendra couldn't shake the feeling of anxiety that lingered. Cedar View wasn't just any place. It had a reputation known for its deeply conservative attitudes. Its police department had long been tarnished by allegations of bias, particularly against minorities. Kendra had read the reports, heard the accounts. Many officers had expressed their discontent with her appointment. A black woman taking charge of their department now. But Kendra wasn't one to retreat. As she approached a traffic light that was about to turn red, a flash of blue and red lights illuminated her rearview mirror. A patrol car pulled up behind her, sirens sounding. Instinctively, Kendra's heart rate increased. She knew this was no coincidence. She pulled over to the side of the road, the grass on the shoulder crunching under her tires. Two officers, both white, stepped out of the vehicle. The senior officer, a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, walked towards her car with a deliberate, measured pace. The younger officer followed closely behind, his expression tight with suspicion. Kendra lowered her window, her pulse steady yet alert. The senior officer leaned in slightly, his eyes surveying her car before settling on her license and registration. He said flatly, his voice carrying an air of authority that felt somewhat rehearsed. Kendra reached into her glove compartment, retrieving the documents silently. She had learned long ago that in moments like this, silence was often the best tactic. As she handed them over, the senior officer's eyes narrowed slightly, but he remained silent. The younger officer, however, wasn't as reserved. "What brings you out here?" he asked, his tone laced with suspicion. "This area isn't exactly safe, if you catch my drift." Kendra's stomach twisted, but she stayed composed. "I'm on my way to work." "And where exactly would that be?" the younger officer pressed, leaning in a little closer. His smirk indicated he already had assumptions about her. Kendra paused for a moment. She could disclose her position right then and there, put an end to the pretense. But something urged her to hold back. She had faced this scenario before, too many times indeed. The power dynamic here was unmistakable. And she didn't want to begin her first day by creating friction with the very officers she would soon oversee. "You'll find out soon enough," she replied calmly, locking eyes with the young officer. There was no anger in her voice, but she made it clear that she wasn't intimidated. The senior officer, sensing the situation was about to escalate, intervened. "Let's not make this complicated, ma'am. We can take this further if necessary." There it was, the veiled threat, the subtle show of authority. Kendra felt her patience wearing thin. She had endured this type of treatment for years. Disrespect, condescension, assumptions based solely on her skin color. She had fought too hard, climbed too high to let this pass. Kendra took a deep breath, deciding she had played along long enough. "That won't be needed," she stated firmly. "I'm Chief Kendra Hayes. I suggest you reconsider how you're handling this situation." The shift in the atmosphere was tangible. Both officers froze. The senior officer blinked in confusion, his brows furrowing as the realization struck him like a blow. The younger officer's smug expression disappeared, replaced with shock and a hint of fear. "You're the chief?" the senior officer stammered, clearly taken aback. "Yes," Kendra said, her voice steady. "And I'd like to know why exactly I was stopped, and why this line of questioning is even occurring." For a moment, neither officer spoke. The younger one fumbled with his words, trying to devise an excuse, but the damage was already done. The power dynamic had shifted, and they knew it. The senior officer cleared his throat, struggling to regain his composure. "There must have been a misunderstanding." Kendra didn't let him finish. "No, this isn't a misunderstanding," she interrupted, her tone sharp. This is precisely the issue. You stop individuals like me without cause, make assumptions, and attempt to assert your authority because you believe you can get away with it. The senior officer opened his mouth to argue, but no words emerged. He understood she was right. Kendra's calm, unwavering demeanor only highlighted their misconduct. You see, she continued, her gaze fixed on theirs, it's officers like you who breed distrust in the system, and it's people like me who are here to change that. Both officers stood in silence, their faces drained of color. Kendra could feel the significance of the moment settling in. This wasn't just about her. This was about every individual who had been unjustly stopped, questioned, and harassed for not fitting someone else's narrow view of who belonged in certain places. She stepped out of the car, standing tall as she addressed them. You will be reporting to me personally for the next few weeks. I will be reviewing every traffic stop you make, and I suggest you think carefully about how you conduct yourselves moving forward. The senior officer finally regained his voice. We didn't mean any disrespect, Chief. It won't happen again. Kendra nodded, though she knew his words were hollow. It would happen again, perhaps not with these two, but with others. That was why she was here. To eliminate the deep-seated bias that had afflicted Cedar View's police force for far too long. Good, she said quietly before returning to her car. As she drove away, Kendra allowed herself a moment to exhale. She had triumphed in this encounter, but many more challenges lay ahead. Her role as chief of police was more than just a title. It was a duty to ensure that no one else had to endure what she had just experienced. Later that day, Kendra gathered the department for her initial meeting. The tension in the room was palpable as she stood in front of the officers, her presence commanding the attention of everyone present. She recounted the events of that morning, leaving no detail unmentioned. I'm not here to humiliate anyone, she began, her voice steady, but I am here to make it clear that this type of behavior stops now. Every officer in this department will be held accountable for how they treat the citizens of Cedar View, regardless of their race, gender, or background. A murmur of discomfort swept through the room, but Kendra didn't falter. She had dedicated her life to fighting for justice, and she wasn't about to stop now. This is your chance to demonstrate that you are the kind of officers who serve with integrity, she continued. But understand this. I will not tolerate bias. I will not tolerate disrespect. And I will not tolerate anyone who believes they are above the law. Her words reverberated in the silent room. Some officers shifted uncomfortably, while others nodded in quiet agreement. Kendra could sense who was ready to stand with her and who wasn't, but that didn't matter. She was prepared for the challenge. Over the ensuing weeks, news of Kendra's encounter spread through the community. For some, it was a sign that change was finally on the horizon. For others, it was a wake-up call. The media caught wind of the story, and soon Kendra became a representation of what Cedar View needed. Someone unafraid to confront injustice. Someone determined to reform a flawed system. But Kendra understood this was only the beginning. There was still much work to be accomplished. Every stop, every interaction, every choice would be scrutinized. But she was ready. After all, she hadn't fought all these years to remain silent. Now the battle for justice was far from over. But in that moment, driving away from those two humbled officers, Kendra knew one thing for certain. She was precisely where she was meant to be.